So please, you can share your slides, your screen, and we can begin our seminar.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we see your screen. It's I think it's not the title slide, but we see it. Yes. Could you please show your first slide to make sure that it works, because you are now somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, this is the first slide.
No, this isn't. No. It's written stability of stationary solutions. There are many formulas. It's not. It's not the title.
So can you see that now it is on the first page? I am showing the first page, first slide.
Yes, I don't see it. I see as before some formulas, stationary solution perturbation.
So let me share once again. Maybe there is some problem with the sharing. Okay, share this one, window, this one.
Yes, now it's okay. Now we see your first slide. So then I think we can begin the seminar. So it's a pleasure to introduce our today's speaker, Malay Banerjee from Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpure. And Malay will present us today the lecture on the continuation of Turing pattern beyond Turing domain. Please, Malay, you can begin your presentation.
Just one thing, how much time I should take? 45 minutes?
Well, we have 1 hour. Usually it can be 50 minutes and questions. Well, around 1 hour.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Vitaly, for kind introduction and invitation. So my today's talk's title is Continuation of Turing Pattern Beyond Turing Domain. So before going to the main content of the talk, let me describe that what somehow drive us to look at this situation or this kind of mechanism. We read couple of papers that hidden attractors or long transients and some sort of ghost attractors, etc., etc. So many things are available in literature for temporal model. And when we were working on this particular problem for spatiotemporal pattern formation, what we found that sometimes the Turing instability condition is satisfied, but we are not getting the Turing pattern. And sometimes what happens that if we just use the numerical continuation technique for changing parameter values forward and backward, so sometimes we observe that sometimes this Turing pattern also exists beyond the threshold where the coexisting equilibrium point exists. So then we examine the problem in more details and ultimately found some spatiotemporal bifurcation which have some analogy with the temporal bifurcation structure also, and which leads to ultimately this kind of pattern formation. So first,
excuse me, Malay, your slides disappear. So please, could you share again your screen?
Okay. I don't know what is happening. Maybe some problem here.
Yes, now we see the second slide. Yes.
Yeah. So first I'll give some brief introduction about the pattern formation, and then I'll describe the temporal model on which we perform this kind of study. And then I'll come to the spatiotemporal model and talk about spatiotemporal bifurcation and spatiotemporal chaos. And towards the end, I'll mention some future direction on which we may pursue our research in this direction. So these are some examples of spatial pattern that is observed in nature. And once we look at the pattern formation scenario, then first of all, we know that we need to be careful about the choice of space and time scale in order to explain a pattern. So this is the picture of muscle bed taken from this paper Nature Communication in 2014. So here we can see one kind of distribution of the muscle over the seashore, like this kind of structure. But if we consider a small part of this picture and zoom in, then we can find another kind of distribution. And again, if we further zoom in this portion of the picture, then we can see this kind of distribution of muscles on the sand. Now, the point is that once we are looking at some pattern, then we have to understand that whether the existing pattern.
Malay, sorry to interrupt you again, but I don't know, it's my problem, but I see always only the second slide, not maybe, I think that you describe some next slides.
So can you see the picture here?
No, I see the slides where it is written outline.
Okay, what is happening? I don't know.
Wissam,
yes, I'm here.
Wissam, what slide did you see on the screen? It was.
I'm not seeing the outline.
Outline, yes.
Sorry, Prof. Malay, can you, when you share your screen or your desktop and not your slides? Yes, now can you move one slide?
Yes, now. Okay,
yes,
now it's yes. Now it's
okay.
Some images here. Yes.
Yeah, muscle bed. These things. Okay. So this thing I was talking about, that with different space scale, we can see these different kind of patterns. Again, if we look at different kind of ecosystem, we can have these different types of pattern. This is a vegetation pattern in between some sort of water bodies. This is the ribbon forest, and here we can see some sort of dynamic pattern where a group of prey, that is the tuna fish, is attacked by the yellow whale. And what we can observe here, that prey predator, they maintains a cross correlation. So that means the area where prey concentration is high, there is no predator, but at the location where we can see some sort of predators, there is no prey individuals. And with some mathematical model with appropriate numerical simulation, we can generate this kind of pattern. So on the left and on the right, we have two spot pattern, and in between we have this kind of labyrinthine pattern. And we can explain that this kind of pattern may be mathematically cross-validated with this kind of spot pattern, where this spot pattern is called cold spot, because spots are generated due to low concentration of the species. So if we consider the algae here as the biomass, so that means in between where we can see some sort of water spot, so we can assume that at that location the concentration of algae is lower, and that we can see through numerical simulation that here we have this blue spot only. Again, here if we consider that this pattern corresponds to predator population, then some circular location we can see some predators, and that might be mimic this kind of pattern formation here through numerical simulation, which can be considered as a hotspot pattern. And this ribbon forest, this forest pattern can be explained with the help of this kind of labyrinthine pattern. Again, if we look at this picture that is taken from a satellite by NASA, that is marine phytoplankton bloom, and this kind of irregular distribution can be considered as a dynamic pattern which keep on changing with time, and for appropriate model and with the proper choice of parameter values and through numerical simulation, we can see this kind of pattern can be generated from out of some mathematical model and some numerical analysis simulation. So the question is that what mathematical analysis or how mathematical results can support this kind of pattern formation, that we can try to understand that for chosen model under what parametric restriction which kind of pattern may emerge, that is whether it is a stationary pattern or it is a dynamic pattern, and what are the different kind of patterns can be generated by the model. That is the main area of focus or point of interest for study of this kind of spatiotemporal models. This is another example where in this paper by Luca Ridolfi, they have verified these three types of vegetation pattern with the numerical simulation. So on the upper panel, you can see the snapshots of the natural ecosystem, and in the lower panel, you can see the corresponding numerical simulation of a particular model under consideration. But here, what authors have considered that in order to have some irregular spot at this picture as well as this picture, they have considered some additive noise in order to mimic this kind of pattern formation scenario. But as of now, I am not very much convinced about their approach, because as they have considered the additive noise, so there will be difficult to prove the positivity of the solution. Maybe one can make an attempt to consider some sort of bounded noise as it was introduced by Alberto Donofrio, but not used widely to have this kind of pattern out of spatiotemporal model with noise terms. So this is another kind of approach through which one can generate this kind of patterns through numerical simulation of a particular model under consideration. Then question comes, what should be the minimum setup for modeling sorry, through which we can have these type varieties of patterns. So this is the simplest model, which is known as reaction diffusion equation, or can be considered as a non-homogeneous parabolic equation, where U is considered as a resource, V is the consumer, F and G. This describes the temporal interaction between two species, and this Laplacian terms takes care of the fact of the random movement over the domain, and D is a dimensionless parameter, which is ratio of diffusivity of the consumer over the resource. So that means ratio of dV by du, if we consider du and dV are corresponding diffusivities of V and U. And this model is subject to non-negative initial condition and zero flux boundary condition for simplicity, and this particular domain omega can be considered as a rectangular or square domain for simplicity, and its boundary is denoted by delta omega. Now for having stationary pattern, one particular approach is to find out the Turing instability condition, and that Turing instability condition reads like this. So if we solve this particular two equations in order to find out the homogeneous steady states, and then what we can demand that this steady state will remain stable under small amplitude temporal perturbation, but become unstable due to small amplitude heterogeneous perturbation. And the condition that this steady state is stable under temporal perturbation and unstable under spatiotemporal perturbation, these are given by these three conditions. So first two inequality corresponds to stability of homogeneous steady state under temporal perturbation, and the last one corresponds to instability. And if we consider equality here, so this gives the Turing instability boundary between the stable and unstable homogeneous steady states. This is a typical picture of the bifurcation diagram. On the horizontal axis, we have a temporal parameter. On the vertical axis, we have the ratio of diffusivity parameter D. This magenta color curve is the Turing instability curve, which corresponds to the equality that I have shown in the last slide in red color. And this vertical dashed line is the Hopf bifurcation threshold. So it means that homogeneous steady state is stable under temporal perturbation on the left of this vertical line and unstable on the right of this vertical line. And above this magenta color curve, the homogeneous steady state is unstable under heterogeneous perturbation, but stable below this curve for heterogeneous perturbation. So as a result, this Turing bifurcation curve and Hopf bifurcation curve divides the parametric domain into 4 different regions, and this picture somehow represents that what different kind of patterns we can expect. So below this magenta color curve and on the left of this vertical line, we have stable homogeneous steady state. Within this pure Turing domain, that is on the above of magenta color curve and on the left of vertical line, we have stationary Turing pattern. But of course, if we move from one parameter to other parameter, there will be difference in time to reach the heterogeneous stationary structure. And in this domain, we can have either stationary pattern or dynamic pattern depending upon the choice of the parameter value, as well as nonlinearity involved with the model. And further, the settlement of the pattern to a stationary pattern or dynamic pattern corresponds to the initial condition, that means from which basin of attraction you are starting your simulation. And mostly in this region, we can see for some model spatiotemporal chaos, but as far as my knowledge goes, there is no analytical tool by which we can ensure that for certain choice of parameter, this model will produce any spatiotemporal chaos for chosen parameter values. Rather, we need to rely on the numerical simulation to identify where we can see some sort of spatiotemporal chaos. So patterns can be broadly classified into 2 types. One is stationary pattern and other is dynamic pattern. And different patterns under these 2 categories are spot and labyrinthine pattern, traveling wave, periodic traveling wave, modulated traveling wave. And for very specific choice of the parameters and as well as the reaction kinetics, we can have target and spiral patterns also. In the context of resource consumer or prey-predator interaction, this type of pattern don't have any ecological relevance. But in the context of invasion, this target pattern or spiral pattern can be considered as wave of invasion under particular situation. And this temporal chaos is quite interesting, which explain that both the population coexist, but they never settle down to a particular structure. Rather, we can see some sort of dynamic coexistence between 2 species. And there are 2 other types of patterns which are which can arise in the reaction diffusion model, that is pulse pattern or periodic pulses. But as far as my knowledge goes, it mostly observed in models with non-local interaction term and incorporating some other terms also. So now we come to the particular model on which I want to talk about. So this is a prey-predator model where prey follows the classical logistic growth law, and FUV is the functional response, the functional form which actually describes the type of interaction between prey and predator, or we can say the grazing pattern of the prey by the predator. And here we assume M is the linear intrinsic death rate for the predator and E is the conversion efficiency. So for this model, what particular functional response I am going to consider here, that is the model with cooperative hunting. So for that purpose, the basic functional response is the Holing type 2 functional response. And for hunting cooperation, this lambda V comes into the picture. So that means attack race, it somehow depends upon the predator density. And what is the basic assumption here? So if predator population is quite low, so there is not enough size of the group, so there might be less chance of success to catching a prey. But once there is a large group of the predator, they will be successfully able to find and catch the prey. So this type of model was first introduced by Berek and then analyzed in detail for temporal part by Hilker and Alves. And what they have emphasized for this cooperative hunting function, that was given by lambda 0 plus AV. But what we believe that this kind of formulation have some limitation, because it assumes with the increasing magnitude of the population density of predator, so this attacking rate will keep on increasing unboundedly. But in reality, if we just try to understand the ecology behind this kind of functional form, so assumption is that there is sufficient number of individual who can form a group such that they will be successful to catch a prey. And we know for each type of species there is a maximum herd size. They should not form a hunting group of predator with in as many as number of predator. For all the species, it is known that there is some sort of maximum pack size or herd size for which they will hunt for prey. And in order to incorporate this idea, we have modified this form a little bit just to introduce a saturation term, such that the assumption is that this kind of cooperation cannot grow unboundedly, but there will be a level of saturation. So once we incorporate this formulation into the model, then
sorry, Prof. Malay, maybe we have a question in the audience. Sorry to interrupt you. Sorry, can you ask?
Yes, I have.
Yes, can you?
How does the general ghost type model, which typically incorporates specific growth rates and carrying capacities, affect the formation and evolution of Turing patterns in reaction diffusion systems, especially when compared to more simplistic prey-predator models? Thanks.
Sorry, I could not get your question correctly.
It belongs to Turing patterns. I'll repeat. How does the general ghost type model, which typically incorporates specific growth rates, in this case, and carrying capacities, affect the formation and evolution of Turing patterns and reaction diffusion systems, especially when compared to more simplistic prey-predator models?
Yeah, that's true. But the point is that in case of classical Gauss type model with this kind of logistic growth for prey and functional response, if depends upon prey only, then it should not produce any Turing pattern, because what we can show that the Jacobian matrix fails to satisfy the required sign structure, because A22 will be 0. So in order to satisfy the Turing condition, we need that A11 and A22 will be of opposite sign, but A22 equal to 0 restrict us to find any Turing pattern. So what we observe, either nonlinear death rate for the predator or functional response which depends upon both prey and predator, that supports the Turing pattern formation in Gauss type model. That is logistic growth law and prey dependent functional response and linear death rate of predator cannot leads to any Turing pattern. That is well known result. But here what I just wanted to emphasize on, that there will be a Turing pattern beyond the Turing domain, even the range of parameter where we don't have any coexistence homogeneous steady state. That is the main motivation for this problem.
Yeah, thanks. I got it. Thank you for your answer.
Yeah. And once we consider that kind of saturating effect for the cooperative hunting, so that extra term reflects here in the dimensionless version as the parameter beta. So the summary of the result is that trivial equilibrium point is always unstable, axial equilibrium point is stable if sigma less than this transcritical bifurcation threshold and is unstable if it is above this transcritical bifurcation threshold. One of the coexistence equilibrium point bifurcates from this boundary equilibrium point through a transcritical bifurcation, and as there is a possibility of having two interior equilibrium point and they arise through saddle node bifurcation of coexistence equilibrium point also. And what we can prove that one equilibrium point might be stable or unstable depending upon whether the sigma is less than Hopf bifurcation threshold or greater than Hopf bifurcation threshold, but other one is always a saddle point. So how to identify these two equilibrium, that one is saddle point and other may be stable or may be unstable? So we rely on the fact that if U1 star less than U2 star, so for this model U2 star is always a saddle point and U1 star will be stable depending upon the magnitude of sigma. If we look at the bifurcation diagram in alpha sigma plane, this vertical green line is the transcritical bifurcation curve. This blue curve is the saddle node bifurcation curve. This red color curve is the Hopf bifurcation curve. This saddle node bifurcation curve and Hopf bifurcation curve intersect at the Bogdanov-Takens bifurcation point, from where an global bifurcation curve emerges, which is the homoclinic bifurcation curve, and it disappears at this point when it hits the vertical transcritical bifurcation curve. And as a result, what we can see 6 different kind of topologically different phase portrait for the model under consideration, and those 6 different type of phase portraits are shown here. So in this case, this prey only equilibrium point is stable. Here we can see that this coexistence equilibrium point is unstable but surrounded by a stable limit cycle. Here the coexistence equilibrium point is stable. In this case, we don't find any coexistence equilibrium point and all the trajectory converges to the predator free equilibrium point. And here we can find only one interior equilibrium point which is stable, and in this case we can see only one interior equilibrium point which is unstable but surrounded by a stable limit cycle. Now if we look at the one parameter bifurcation diagram for the model to have a interesting behavior, that if we choose alpha such that, then if we increase the magnitude of sigma, so you can see that this line intersects this global bifurcation curve at 2 different points. And what happens ultimately, if we look at the bifurcation curve, so it shows that this limit cycle disappears through one global bifurcation here, that is a homoclinic bifurcation, but after some time it again disappears. So this kind of structure is not frequently observed in this kind of model. But here the most important take home message that we have to carry forward is this particular threshold, this blue vertical line, which means that two interior equilibrium point exist only on the right hand side of this particular threshold, and on the left there is no coexistence equilibrium point. Now if we move to the corresponding reaction diffusion system, so here what we have considered the diffusion coefficient into the first equation only for the reason that if we consider this d into the second equation, then for the chosen parameter value, the Tьюринг bifurcation threshold is obtained for magnitude of d greater than 100, and which impose some challenge to as the convergence of the numerical simulation of the spatiotemporal model. So that is why we cleverly shifted this d to the first equation, such that the analytically we can argue that for Tьюринг instability we need d should be less than 1, and as a result the chosen parameter value or admissible parameter value for d which allows the Turing instability is a reasonable value and for which convergence of the numerical scheme will be quite easy. As I have mentioned, this is the initial condition, non-negative initial condition, and for simplicity of numerical simulation and bifurcation structure, we have one-dimensional spatial domain. So these are the conditions as I have described earlier, but just one thing I want to highlight here, that is here the Turing instability condition is mainly written in terms of the wave number k, where k is equal to n by L, and this n and L plays a crucial role in our bifurcation analysis. So what we obtain, that for Turing bifurcation we can find out these two conditions. That means this is the Turing bifurcation condition, that is it defines this equality, defines the Turing bifurcation curve, and we expect Turing pattern whenever this inequality is satisfied. And from simple mathematics, or rather we can say algebra, we can understand that range of unstable wave number for particular choice of D is given by this relation, and accordingly what we can find a relation between L and N in order to understand that depending upon the length of the spatial domain, what are the different unstable wave number, those can be fitted within the chosen domain. So therefore this k plus and k minus, they corresponds to critical domain size, which ensures the existence of a pattern, or we can capture the spatiotemporal pattern through numerical simulation. So now this a bifurcation diagram for the spatiotemporal model. So this magenta color curve indicates on the left of this particular line there is no coexistence equilibrium point, and PER corresponds to purely extinction region, means either one of the population will goes to extinction from linear stability analysis. Keep in mind this bifurcation diagram is obtained from linear stability analysis. Below this curve we have this is actually Turing curve, and this TR stands for Turing region, THR stands for Turing Hopf region, and this SR stands for stability region, and this HR stands for Hopf region only. So now this particular figure explains the Turing bifurcation curve with different unstable eigenmode, and which is drawn in terms of two parameters. One is the sigma, that is the temporal parameter, but interestingly another parameter is the length, that means the domain size. So this figure explains that if we choose a domain size from here and corresponding to this sigma, so on the left of this particular blue curve, we can expect the existence of Turing pattern of unstable eigenmode 1. Again, on the left of this magenta color curve, if we choose a parameter value from this region, we can expect the Turing pattern corresponding to unstable eigenmode 2. Similarly, cyan color curve and green color curve corresponds to Turing bifurcation curve with eigenmode 3 and 4. Now, interesting part is that if we just think about this particular domain, what happens that here eigenmode 1 is unstable, eigenmode 2 is unstable. So we are interested to know how these two different mode patterns can bifurcate from one another. That I am going to explain in next couple of slides. And one important point we have to keep in mind that observance of appropriate pattern depends upon the domain size, that means the length of the domain. So if we consider a domain size corresponding to 5, then you can see that this dashed line does not falls in the interior of any one of this Turing instability domain. So therefore, for this choice of the domain, we cannot see any Turing pattern. And as a result, the numerical continuation of the spatiotemporal bifurcation structure produces the same structure as the temporal model. So upper branch is the unstable coexistence homogeneous state, lower branch it is partly stable from Sn to H. Within this range, this stable homogeneous steady state, and beyond it we have a Hopf bifurcation. So here what we can observe that homogeneous in state but oscillatory in time pattern bifurcate from this particular threshold. Now if we increase the domain size from L equal to 5 to L equal to 10, so you can see only one eigenmode is unstable. And now if we look at the spatiotemporal bifurcation structure, so from this point this eigenmode 1 pattern exists, and numerical continuation detects that this pattern continues up to this level. And what you can see that homogeneous coexistence state exists on the right hand side of this particular Sn threshold, but this Turing pattern which was generated around the homogeneous steady state corresponding to the unstable eigenmode 1 continues beyond the existence of coexistence equilibrium point, and that is why I marked the title of the talk as Turing pattern outside the Turing domain. So then what we can do, we can actually just find these two type of one mode heterogeneous stationary structure depending upon the choice of the initial condition. And in the previous slide, these two branch, that means upper branch and lower branch, they actually corresponds to this maximum and minimum of this particular stationary structure. Next, in order to have this result, in order to justify the numerical continuation, what we can consider that there exists a solution of u and v which is a function of space only but time independent, because that solution indicates those are stationary patterns. So therefore they satisfy these two equations, and this kind of boundary condition with the reaction kinetics F and G, these are given by this one. So except sigma, all the parameter values we substituted here. So this can be considered as a second order ordinary differential equation subjected to periodic boundary conditions. And then what we can consider, for a particular choice of sigma equal to sigma 0, we can give a small perturbation around the stationary state, and that will give us this kind of linear eigenvalue equation. And then we can consider a discretization of the space from 0 to L with the grid points x0 to xm, which are equispaced, and correspondingly the values of u and v at those special nodes can be denoted by u0 u1 up to um and v0 v1 up to vm. Then what happens, that ultimately this eigen function equation converts to a system of linear equation where X is the matrix which consists of these elements. That means u0 to um and v0 to vm, and this leads us this kind of structure of the matrix. And therefore what we can study the nature of eigenvalues of this matrix M. So if we have all the eigenvalues of this matrix have negative real part, so then we can consider this vector x as a stable structure, so which corresponds to stationary solution of the problem. And we can identify different kind of bifurcation depending upon how many eigenvalues of this system crosses the value 0. So it might have only 1 0 eigenvalue and rest of the eigenvalues have negative real part. So then there is a bifurcation of codimension 1, and if we have except 2 eigenvalues, all the eigenvalues are having negative real part and 2 are purely imaginary complex conjugate eigenvalue. So this indicates the existence of Hopf bifurcation, and Hopf bifurcation corresponds to the pattern which is homogeneous in space and oscillatory in time. So ultimately the idea is that stationary solution can be continued beyond the Turing instability region by assuming that they are solution of this boundary value problem with periodic boundary condition. So then this technique can be applied to other size of the domain. So now we choose the domain size as L equal to 15, which crosses the two Turing instability domain. One corresponds to eigenmode 1 and another corresponds to eigenmode 2. And in this case, we have this kind of spatiotemporal bifurcation structure. So this magenta color curve corresponds to Turing structure with unstable eigenmode 2, and this particular blue curve corresponds to the one mode solution, and bifurcation structure looks like this one, and this branch point BP1, BP2, this limit point LP1 and LP2 and other branch points BP3 and LP2, they can be obtained by analyzing that large structure of the matrix, and it is quite challenging to perform the numerical computation, and frankly speaking this part is done by my PhD student. I don't know much about the details how to perform it, but there are some packages like DD-BIF tool through which we can, or PD2Path, such that we can cross verify our result with the numerical scheme which we have used to understand the bifurcation structure. So finally, if we consider some different value of D, that is D equal to 40 and L equal to 10, so domain size remains 10 but D is quite high. So in this case what happens, that there exists a one mode Turing bifurcation branch, and then from here we can see that two interesting branches appear, and they correspond to solutions which are both oscillatory in space and time. And why we have these two different branches from here, it actually corresponds to the different oscillatory structure of the system. So this particular structure corresponds to stationary solution, and this particular pattern corresponds to which is oscillatory in space and time. So what happens, that if we can think about that there is a oscillation of this kind of solution structure, suppose this shape is oscillating up and down, and there is also a change in the difference between maxima and minima, those are mostly observed in case of pattern which is oscillatory both in space and time. And as a result, what happens, you may try to understand that this part can oscillate between two values, this part can be oscillate between two values, and those two different values, that is corresponding maxima and minima, they are responsible for having this kind of two structures. And numerical continuation ensures that these two solution branch ultimately coincides with this particular structure, that is which is the solution that is homogeneous in space and oscillatory in time. And further, if we increase the domain size L equal to 50, keeping D equal to 40, so then what we can see, some sort of spatiotemporal chaos, and this is the period doubling bifurcation route to spatiotemporal chaos, and this is the plot of spatial Lyapunov exponent, and which shows that after this particular threshold, if I recall correctly, 1.172, the largest Lyapunov exponent is positive, and that is more or less coincide with the chaotic regime that you can see at this particular level. Now, before proceeding further, I must mention one thing, that although I have mentioned that once we have D into the first equation, then mostly we observe that value of D less than 1 will give the Turing instability condition. But here the cooperative hunting is responsible, and we can actually show analytically that with the presence of cooperative hunting, if D is considered into the resource equation, then Turing instability will occur in the case that is D greater than 1. So this is one important remark. Now, finally, I talk a little bit about this particular problem. I should not take more than 5 minutes. That will cover my stipulated time. So this model, what we have considered, that model with reproductive alley effect. So that means it can be also considered as a mate finding alley effect. And what we believe that this kind of growth law is mainly valid for two-sex population, and this is much more ecologically justifiable compared to the logistic growth equation. And what we have done, we have considered a model with mate finding alley effect, or you can say reproductive alley effect into the prey growth, and Beddington-D'Angelis functional response in order to observe an interesting structure of the spatiotemporal bifurcation. So for this model, we did the Turing instability analysis. We identified the localized pattern, traveling wave, spatiotemporal chaos. But another interesting phenomena we have observed, that is Belyakov-Divanay transition. So what happens that in this case, if you perform some numerical simulation for appropriately chosen parameter values, what we observe that although the Turing instability condition is satisfied, but we cannot find out any stationary pattern in a long run. We have observed that sometimes it shows some Turing-like pattern, but again it disappears. But ultimately it settles down to a different kind of structure, special structure, which do not correspond to the unstable eigenmodes of the Turing instability for particularly chosen parameter values. Then through careful observation, what we have observed, so this is the time and this is the plot of spatial average of resource component, and what you can see, there are different types of oscillation, and as a oscillatory structure, sometimes we can see some Turing kind of pattern here, but ultimately it settles down to a localized structure, and this structure will appear only when the Belyakov-Divanay bifurcation is condition is satisfied. And if we look at the corresponding spatial pattern for these two different regions, one is taken from here and another is taken from here. So you can see this corresponds to the this area marked in red, and this corresponds to the portion marked in green. So this particular heterogeneity, that means number of peaks which we observe here, that matches with the unstable eigenmode corresponds to the Turing instability. But this pattern is quite often in and on, and ultimately it settles down to this kind of structure. And here, if we count the number of peaks and calculate the corresponding wave number, this does not falls under the stipulated range of Turing instability. That means this unstable, this wave number does not falls within the region k minus to k plus, and that is why we performed a systematic analysis to identify the bifurcation, and ultimately what we proved that there is a Belyakov-Divanay type of transition which is responsible for this kind of transition of pattern. And interestingly, what I must mention here, that in this case we can identify or we can label that Turing pattern is a transient pattern, whereas the localized structure obtained through Belyakov-Divanay transition is the stationary structure. And if any model admits such kind of bifurcation structure, so we can claim that in the context of spatiotemporal model, there is a analytical or rather semi-analytical way of detecting or predicting that there will be long transients before settling down to stationary pattern. But I must mention that the range of long transients solely depends upon the choice of the parameter value, because this long transient time also follows some kind of time scale. That means some time scale of the form t to the power alpha, and for different values of alpha we can estimate for different parameter ranges. So this is all about my talk. So most of the part I mentioned about Turing pattern outside Turing domain. This is published in this particular article, International Journal of Bifurcation and Chaos. And last part of the talk that I have mentioned very briefly, this appeared this year in Journal of Mathematical Biology. And these are the main books, mainly the book by Xin Mei we have considered to perform the numerical continuation of the spatiotemporal bifurcation structure. And this is also classical book, and this book contains some analytical results for proving the positivity and boundedness of the solution for the spatiotemporal model. And these are my colleague Professor Ghorai and our PhD student Subroto De, who did most of the part of this work in collaboration with me. And thank you very much for your kind attention.
Yes, thank you, Professor Malay, for this presentation. It was interesting about the continuation of Turing patterns beyond the Turing domain. So now we have a few minutes, and I guess we have time for questions. Does anyone from the audience have any question for Professor Malay? So I'm gonna ask my question so that if anyone has a question, he can as well ask. I have a question about the Turing bifurcation diagram and the spatiotemporal. We had this difference in diffusion where you added the D for the first equation, I guess, for you, and for the V, it was taken to be 1. And then we had this bifurcation diagram. My main question here is, so if I understood that, we have this like Turing line, and then we have this difference in diffusion. So this difference in diffusion between the 1 and the D made us pass from this stability or hub until the Turing in both cases. And is this was a necessary or a sufficient condition mainly to get this shape out there, this transition in the solution form?
In this case, what happens that once you have the Turing instability condition, then for Turing instability condition we can prove that D should be always not equal to 1, because D equal to 1 corresponds to non-Turing pattern. Reason is that for Turing instability, two condition is required to be satisfied simultaneously. One is A11 plus A22 less than 0, and then for our formulation, that is A11 plus DA22 greater than 0. So A11, A22 negative, D is a positive quantity such that A11 plus DA22 is positive. So from here we can actually show D cannot be equal to 1, because if D equal to 1, then A11 plus A22 less than 0 and A11 plus A22 greater than 0, these two inequality should not be simultaneous, should be satisfied simultaneously. But the question is that whether D less than 1 or D greater than 1, that completely depends upon the sign of A11 and A22. For different type of models, we can have either A11 positive, A22 negative, and vice versa. And accordingly, for the formulation of the model, you can consider D into the, that is the dimensionless diffusivity into the first equation, or dimensionless diffusivity into the second equation. And accordingly, you can have this D greater than 1 or D less than 1. Now, the point is that once we have this Turing instability condition, the second problem that I have discussed, that Turing instability condition only ensures that if you give a small amplitude heterogeneous perturbation around the homogeneous steady state, so solution will go away from the homogeneous steady state. Whether it will be settled down to some stationary structure or not, that cannot be ensured from the Turing instability condition. Rather, there are several theoretical results on this kind of equation, that is existence and non-existence of heterogeneous structure or non-constant steady state. But as far as my knowledge is concerned, there is no rigorous cross-validation of the analytical result and the numerical simulation. Specifically, we can ask that when the condition for non-constant steady state is satisfied, so such range of parameter falls as a subset of Turing instability domain or superset of the Turing instability domain. That is the biggest question. But there is another way that is called multiple time scale analysis, for which you can analytically determine the possibility of existence of Turing pattern, but those analysis is valid for parameter values pretty close to the Turing bifurcation threshold. Once you are well inside the Turing domain, that kind of multiple time scale analysis is not valid, because that is a perturbation analysis. So validation of the result depends upon what amount of small perturbation you are providing into the system and how long this linear approximation with matches with the complete structure produced by the nonlinear system. So there are several questions in between to ensure that once the Turing instability condition is satisfied, then whether we have heterogeneous stationary pattern or not.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this is indeed interesting. Thank you. Thank you so much. Do anyone from the audience have any question for Professor Malay? Well, if not, so we have reached the time for our seminars. Ah, yes, we have a question. Yes.
I think there are one person raised their hands.
Yes, I'm waiting. So you can ask your question.
Oh, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Oh, thanks. Good night. I want to ask a question. Are there any potential extensions or future directions for research in this area? What you find particularly promising or interesting?
Well, this is a very good question, and frankly speaking, what I have discussed here, that is Belyakov-Divane transition, that should be an interesting question to identify a class of model which will admit this kind of bifurcation structure. That is one thing, because for Turing instability, that is a well established result, that if your Jacobian matrix follows a particular sign pattern, so either plus plus in one row and minus minus in another row, or one in column and another in second column, so then it ensures the existence of Turing instability. But as of now, there is no explicit result which will ensure that under which condition this Belyakov-Divane transition will be satisfied. And second important question is that this kind of analysis can be extended to 3 and higher dimensional models. I am not talking about space dimension, rather I am talking about number of interacting species, because on the deterministic system, that means ODE system, people now started talking about that trophic level consists with different interacting species. So you can think about that resource consists of 3-4 different species. Consumer can consist of 2 to 5. That means number of species corresponding to different trophic level can vary. One might be larger than the other, and those kind of situation in case of self diffusion, in case of cross diffusion. And also another point we explored a little bit with Yuri Tutunov, that direct and indirect prey taxis and predator taxis, those are according to my idea are very challenging area of research. From theoretical part, you can think about proving the existence, uniqueness, global boundedness of the solution, as well as derivation of amplitude equation, and some extensive numerical simulation and study with spatiotemporal bifurcation structure. So these are quite interesting problems which left for us to address in near future. And another interesting thing, I am always looking for such kind of literature or assistance from some experts who can ensure or who can give some idea about the what should I say, that validation of these analytical results with appropriate field data. That means how to measure diffusivity, how their patch size is increasing over time, those are stationary or not. So such kind of validation remains another interesting area of research.
Thank you for answer. It was interesting lessons. Thanks.
Thank you. So we have another question from the audience.
Yeah, there is one
you can
more
ask your
raised hand
question.
I can see.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, what motivated you to focus on the continuation of Turing patterns beyond the Turing instability domain, and what gaps or unanswered questions in the existing literature does your research aim to address?
Actually, we use, as I have mentioned, that PD2 path software to identify such kind of bifurcation structure and then cross-verified with the system of linear equation, as I have mentioned in very briefly. So we have actually cross-verified those things, because the point is that we need to restrict over significantly small domain, and we have chosen parameter values in such a way that the structure of the matrix should not be large enough, should not be very large, such that the calculation of eigenvalues at each step will take too much time to run, because we don't have any expertise to perform this kind of analysis with the help of parallel computing system. But I believe some parallel computing system will help us to perform such kind of analysis. And if you want to have a look at the details of that numerical continuation of the spatiotemporal bifurcation structure, so that book by Zen May is quite interesting. They have given a lot of details.
Thank you, it was very interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I guess we also have one more question.
Yeah, there is one more.
There is one raised hand.
Good evening. Thank you for your lecture. I would like to ask you if can we find any examples in medicine or biology? When I say in biology, I consider in cells. Where can we see the presence of the Hopf domain?
Yeah, right now I cannot provide you the particular reference, but recently I started working with one colleague from NIT Durgapur, who have observed this kind of heterogeneous pattern in case of protein kinetics. So if you send me an email, I'll be happy to send you the reference where I have seen such kind of Hopf structure or Turing instability structure for the model, which can be applied in biomedical application or even biology, not ecology. There are certain examples. Definitely, there are certain examples, mainly in case of protein kinetics.
Okay, thank you very much. It was quite informative answer.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other question from the audience? No. Okay, so now we thank you, Professor Malay, for this presentation. It was indeed interesting. And thank you for the audience to be here with us today, and have a nice day. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.